when you search for something in this dictionary, basically you're searching for the raw text throughout the entire dictionary. And so it's going to order them in certain ways, right? So if I type in Yaeng is a very common word, and it appears a lot. But the first one that appears is going to be the one that has this verbecci, right? So it has some sort of ranking system. And there's certain things that are hard to type, like, let's see. There's like a Y, like a Y with like a nasality. I'm trying to think of a word that has it. It's not that common to see written, but sometimes there's going to be weird words, and so you guys don't have to write that. You can just write without any accents, and it's going to search it with that. You can write the accents, and it'll improve your search, but if not, then you'll be able to find it. So the main big categories inside this dictionary that Navajo has are verbs and nouns. Okay, and there's some other categories too, but for now I just want to show you some examples of verbs and nouns. So for example, aruru, I like this one because we use it a lot, right, in Portuguese, jururu. This means tristeza. This is here, and so you can see that a noun is going to have this substantivo mark. So this means that it's a noun. That's how you know it's a noun. In Tupi Antigo, there is no such thing as nouns or adjectives or verbs, right? They're not set things. So when I look at this aruru, if you find a noun, any noun that is possuível, how can I say this? Possessible, right? In English, if any noun that you can have, right? Like I can't have the sun. The sun is not mine. Right? So I can't use the sun as though it were a verb. But if I can have, like, for example, sadness, right? Or I can be sad. When we use these are called second-class verbs. Some people describe these as descriptive verbs or stative verbs, right? So these verbs are more like ser in Portuguese. They're things that you are. It describes your state. It's not an action necessarily. Sometimes it's kind of fuzzy, right? Because these things are cultural, whether it's stative or not, right? Like, for example, maenduar. Maenduar is lembrar. And so if we were to search for lembrar in Portuguese, sorry, Phil, you can't search in English. You'll find that we have mo maenduar, right? This mo we'll talk about later, but this is a causative prefix. It means to make something do something, right? So if maenduar is remember, lembrar, then mo maenduar is to make somebody remember, right? I'm making you remember. And you see mo at the beginning of words in Tupi, that's what that means, always. If the mo is at the beginning of the word, it means that I'm making you do something else. So that's a useful thing that we'll talk about more in depth later, but just so you know what that is for now. So this maenduar, you'll notice that Navajo has described it as a verb of the second class, right? And that's how I'm presenting it to you in the grammar. If I go ahead and open up the grammar in a new tab here, let me go take a look at it. Quick start. We can go to the roots, right? And so on this page, work in progress, of course, you can see that first class verbs are going to get these prefixes, whereas second class verbs are going to get these prefixes. Now I call these prefixes, you notice how I write it with a space? Here, when we use it, aquer, right? Quer means to sleep, dormir. Ishe, aquer. You don't have to say ishe, you can just say aquer. In linguistics, this is pro-drop. It means we can drop the subject because this prefix implies the subject. So, aquer, I sleep. Erequer, you sleep. Oroquer, we sleep, but not you. Yaquer, we sleep, including you. Pequer, y'all sleep. And oquer, they, he, she, it sleeps. So, you'll notice that we write it like that. Here, we're writing it separate because Navajo wrote it separately. I think I'm going to change this. I think, so this might be changing. I might start writing it stuck, like an actual prefix, because in practice, this is not a pronoun, right? Pronouns can have words in between them, right? So if I say, she ma'induar, if I say that, and let's say I want to add an adverb in between she and ma'induar, right? So I want to say, she ma'induar is like, I remember, right? I am eu sou lembrante. I am what remembers. That's literally what it means. So if I want to say like, yesterday, I was remembering, like, quese she ma'induar, I can't say she quese ma'induar. You see what I'm saying? I can't put the adverb in between the she here and the ma'induar. And that's why I call them prefixes, because it literally is stuck to the word. Does that make sense? So when you see this form, I write it with a space because Navajo wrote it with a space, and we base ourselves heavily on his literature. But we might change this over time because it's becoming more useful from a didactic standpoint to learn it as a prefix. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, great. So these are the prefixes that we're going to have. And you'll notice something here. These are the subject pronouns. If you see these full form subject pronouns, these are in fact pronouns, right? So you can say ishe quase aker. I yesterday slept, right? You can do that. You can put stuff between. It's a full pronoun. That's fine. These forms are where we derive these prefixes from. If you'll notice, they're very similar. So ishe just loses the first e. It just becomes she in this second class context. Ende loses the first vowel. It just becomes nde. Nde. And this nde, you can also say it without the d. This is a dialectal thing. And it has kind of do with the nasality. Sometimes in a nasal ambient, a nasal, environment, the D will start to happen, whereas when it's an oral environment without nasality, you won't have the D, it'll just be ne. So you can say ne or nde. Usually we say nde, it's more common. Ore and yande are exactly the same. You don't have to change them at all, right? This prefix is literally the same thing as the subject pronoun, very easy. And then pe is the same thing as pe, but it doesn't have this extra funny eh. So it's just pe, easy, no nasal. And then ae probably changes the most, right? So ae is our subject pronoun. You can also use ae in a demonstrative sense, like it. You can say like that, ae. You can use ae like that, he, she, they, that, it. And then when we're doing it in this form, it becomes an I, e. So it changes a good bit. So a lot of vowels, ae or e. In a pluriform, it's going to become an S, right? And so we've seen that in the part about here. You can see shema enduar, and then here we have the original verb is sakwaur or aquaur, and then in the third person it becomes sakwaur, not e aquaur, right? Because it's a pluriform verb. And I'm going to do more research. I'm doing more research to figure out linguistically exactly why this pluriformity happens. But for now, unfortunately, you just have to learn which ones have pluriform and which ones don't. That's all. But maybe we'll figure out in the future a better explanation for that. So that's something about the dictionary. That's the difference between second-class verbs and first-class verbs, is that second-class verbs are something that you have or something that you are. The verb itself, the auxiliary verb of ter or ser or estar or to be or to have, is implied. We're not actually saying it. So when I say shema induar, that means I am, this am is hidden. We don't have it, right? I'm just saying I remember. I am remembering. Like my state is of being remembered. That's what we're saying with that. And if we were to put an A at the end of it, shema induara, right? Shema induara, that becomes a noun. So you can take any second class verb that doesn't end with a vowel already, if you just add an A to it, it becomes a noun. So if I say she mainduara, that means my memory, the thing that I remembered, right? My memory, a minha lembrança, something like that. So she mainduara, my memory. She mainduar, I am remembering. Eu sou lembrante. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about potential ways to change that or say it differently, or any doubts? It's truly interesting. So here on the dictionary, if it's not already enabled by default, you can click this little thing, mostrar conjugações, and I have the conjugations for quite a bit of verbs here. So you can take a look at what it looks like, indicativo, and then you can negate them to take a look at what it looks like in the negative form. So nasce mainduari, that's how we say the negative form, and we can go more into depth on that today, but today I mostly wanted to go over the pronunciation. So just to wrap up this lesson on the dictionary a little bit, when you see a verb of the second class, just remember that's how you conjugate it. But if you see like a noun like this, anga, for example, anga, pensamento, this is also a verb of the second class. Like nouns are inherently verbs of the second class if they're possessive, right? So I can possess a pensamento. It can be my thought, it can be your thought. That's something we can have. So I can say shit ung, and you can see he has it here. Because Navajo was mostly, when he was creating this dictionary, he was mostly concerned with teaching people how to translate things from Tupi to Portuguese. So that's why he wrote it in this way. He wasn't trying to describe Tupi the way it was linguistically. He was trying to describe Tupi in terms of Portuguese so people could translate documents from Tupi to Portuguese. So that's why you'll see that anga is a substantivo, and the adjective ung, pensante, right? I am thinking, eu sou pensante. He records this as an adjective because it's the closest thing that we can relate to in English and Portuguese with what this is doing in Tupi, right? In practice, these are adjectives, but semantically speaking, these are verbs of the second class, okay? So anytime you see something that's an adjective or a noun, it is also a verb of the second class, and it can be conjugated that way. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. All right, great. So, one thing I want to mention as well, which I'll probably mention this a lot of times, but when you see a transitive verb, this verbo transitivo, and if you want to find all of them, you can also just search this in the dictionary, right? Verbo transitivo, here's all of them, goes for a very long time, right? We have a lot of transitive verbs. And it's because when you put the mo on an intransitive verb or a verb of the second class, which is also intransitive, it becomes transitive because you're making someone do something. So it gains an object, it becomes transitive. That's something interesting. So transitive roots in Tupi, right? Aang, for example, akab, all these u, they must have an object. You have to have an object with them, right? If you're doing the verb, you have to do the verb to something because it's transitive. And that goes for nouns as well. So if I want to say like acab, right? Acab means brigar. So here's the verb for that. If I want to say I fight with him, ishe ae ayakab, right? Ishe ae ayakab. I fight with him. If I didn't have this ae here, it's like, who are you fighting with? It doesn't make sense grammatically. It feels like in English when we say, oh, did you buy what you needed to buy? And then you respond to me, I bought. We can't do that. In Portuguese, that's okay. But in English, you have to say, I bought it, or I bought them, or I bought, we need an object. So that's the transitivity that we're talking about. It feels incomplete when we don't have that. And so, for example, ayakab, right, means like, it means that I fight you, right? So for example, let's look at these nominal tense. So, acab. Can anyone tell me, based on what I told you before, how you would turn this into a noun to turn it from to fight into just fight, right? A fight. I'll pick on someone if nobody volunteers.
To add an A to it.
Yeah, that's a great start. So it would become acaba, right? That's a fight. So we have acaba. But what's the problem here? What's the problem that we're missing that I just described?
You need to mention who you're fighting with.
Yes, exactly. So even when it's a noun, we can't just have a general fight. It needs to be fighting someone or something, right? To make it complete. So in these cases, which I have here, I believe. Let's go to this section, the transitive roots. I've recorded that in, let's see, I'll just do a search for it. Here it is. So this little tip right here, while you're going through the suggestions, you should see this tip. So if we want to use a generic object, we use mba'e for things and poro or moro for people. So right, so if we want to say that I was fighting something, right? Like maybe I was fighting with my feelings, right? It could be mba'e acaba, right? Thing fighting. Or if I was fighting with a person, it would be moro acaba, right? Fighting with people generically. Or if I was fighting with Phil, it could be fil acaba, right? If I say she fil acaba, that says my Phil fight, right? My fight with Phil, right? If they say Phil she acaba, that means Phil's fight with me. Does that make sense? The object is always going to be to the left of the verb. We stick it right as like a prefix, basically, the object. So when we use object pronouns, we're going to use those same second class verb prefixes, right? So not only are those, I call them personal pronouns because they're not specifically subject pronouns. They're not specifically object pronouns. You can kind of use them for a lot of different things, and you'll get the feeling for it as you get used to the grammar of Tupi. But, if I say here, for example, he's saying, She acá te catunhé, até mesmo gritou comigo. He's saying she acá, right? He's saying like you or he, something, third person, was yelling with me. So I'm the object in this case, right? So she is being used as an object pronoun. So she acá. That's the fight. That's the yelling or the fighting with me. If that makes sense to everyone. Okay. So now that we covered that, in terms of objects, before we move on to pronunciation, does anyone have any questions about the transitivity of that or how we make nouns? Does anybody know, okay, what happens if the noun already ends in a vowel? How do we make, or the root, right? Let's say we have this, for example, yuka. And I apologize that I keep coming up with really dark words, but this means matar. So yuka is to kill. It's a transitive verb, right? And it ends with an a tónica, right? It's a tonal a. So if it ends with an a normally, we can take away the a, and that's how we get the actual root. If you put the a, if you see an a that's not tonic, it's always going to be a noun. If you see like this, for example, yuka, it actually doesn't change at all, right? She yuka could be it would literally mean the fight with me, right? As we've already talked about, or my killing, not fight. This one means to murder. So my murder. She yuka is like my murder. So that could be used as like a verb, she yuka, like with me as the object. Or it could be a noun like my possession, like she yuka, like my murder, the murder of me, right? So that's why it's interesting, because we're kind of blurring the lines between possession and object of a verb, right? Where it's like I'm possessing the verb as an object, she yuka. Because it already ends in a vowel, we don't change it. You only add the a when it ends in a consonant, if that makes sense. So if I wanted to say like my murder of Phil would be she Phil yuka, right? When I killed Phil, that's what we're saying there. So the object will go before it, and so that could be talking about the action of doing it or as a noun. Like in practice, does it really matter what we're trying to say as long as the meaning is the same, right? Does it matter if it was a noun or a verb if we're communicating the same concept and the same idea that I was the one who killed Phil? Phil's dying over there. I'm going to kill him with laughter. All right, let's move on to the pronunciation. Any questions? So for those of you who were there on Monday, you kind of already got a preview of this. I finished all of them. I don't know if you guys can hear these, but you can do this in your free time, and I recommend you do this for any language that you're learning. You find a pronunciation guide like this where you have someone reading out a word to you in a way that you can be confident that it's fairly good. And I did my best here. It's mostly me talking in these, so maybe over time we'll get some more indigenous people in the audios. But for now, you've got me. This is all you've got. You've got a gringo, so sorry about that. You should be repeating what these people say and you know, miming, mimicking, imitating. We want to be copying to them as much as we can. Like maybe you say it 100, 200, 300 times in the mirror because you're trying to change your muscles. Because some of these sounds like they're not easy to make these sounds, right? I got to explain it to you. Is like E and oo, but you got to say like halfway in the middle. You know, it takes a long time for your muscles to get used to that. It hurts in the beginning. It actually strains your vocal cords. So make sure you're practicing and repeating. So I want to go down and we're going to go through this pronunciation guide one by one. Try not to be too slow or boring with it, but I want to explain some of these sounds to you, and most of them for Portuguese speakers and probably English speakers as well, it should be fairly straightforward. You should just be like, oh yeah, that's obvious. But some of them might be a little bit tricky, so we're just going to go through them real quick. And feel free to stop me and just turn on your microphone and shout out a question if you got a question. Because I'm not looking at the chat. Oh, Igor says, poor Phil. Yeah, I agree. Poor Phil. All right, let's start.
So,
Can you guys hear that or no? No? When I do that?
so,
No. Okay, so I guess you're not getting my audio. So I'll just say it. It's the same thing. So. So the difference here that you have to note is that this apostrophe here, it basically means a glottal stop, occlusão glottal. So that's the difference between if I say so or so. And again, I apologize if you were here Monday. I did talk about this stuff on Monday. So that should be pretty straightforward. This means animal, right? So that's fun. Animal is not something that we can have, right? That doesn't work. In Tupi, we have possuível and não possuível. We have possessible and non-possessible. Things in the nature that are living things, we cannot possess those. We can't. That can't be mine. That's an animal. It's not my animal. Now, if I want to say oguera, right? Oguera, that means o que foi animal. What used to be an animal, right? So this is a glimpse into Tupi's noun tense, right? We don't have verbal tense in Tupi, but nouns do have tense. And so when we put this uera at the end of that puts it into the past, right? What used to be an animal. That means a dead animal, right? Or carne. So I can say oguera, something like that. I can say that. That's fine. But I can't say o. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. Even when we talk about pets, for example, this idea of possessing an animal.
When we talk about pets, we're gonna be using. Let's see, reimbaba, I believe. Reimbaba. Let me find this. Animal just Xerembaba, this one. So that means minha criação. You say Xerembaba sou. You'd say minha criação animal. So that you would basically you can do that. You can have a pet. Yeah. and that can be yours, but it's yours via. So you're using this reimbaba, this minha criação, to create this agency. You can't use the blank possessive. You have to say that it's yours because it's your creation, because you're raising it, not because you own it, but because you're raising it, right? There's a different relationship there than pure possessiveness, but we would translate it the same way. Yeah, good question.
I saw that what you were just showing now, it says also shiru, I think.
Yeah, shiru. Where we have that?
On the end.
Yeah, shiru probably comes from. It could come from sherimbaba, but it could also come from sheirun, right? Irun. This means compañero. It's also like it means con, right? So if I say irunamo, that means it will be with me. So irun means con, like that, and then namo is the future of the noun. So irunnamo means it will be with me. You will go with me. So if I say ase nde irunnamo, that means aso nde irunnamo, that means I'm gonna go with you. And so when we use it as a noun, she irun, I'm literally saying you're what is with me, which literally means my friend, right? Like you are what is with me.
Yeah, it's funny because in the South we usually, I'm from Rio Grande do Sul, and in the South we normally call shiru someone that is your friend, and I never knew what this came from.
It comes from this. Yeah, exactly. It's cool, right? And that probably came from Guarani, but right, like Guarani and Tupi Antigo are so similar that, you know, it's the same thing basically when you say it. They just write it like this, sheiru. They might even write it like this, sheiru. But yeah, it's pretty interesting, huh? Irun. And there's another one that you probably say is Shara, right?
Shara, yeah.
Yeah, that means Sherera, my name, meu nome, Shara. It's when someone has the same name as you. You say, Shara, Sherera, you have my name. Right? That makes sense.
Super cool.
Super cool, right?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
How would you say that something belongs to you then?
You could say, you could use the she, but it depends on if it's possessive or not, right? So like if you're talking about my knife, right? You can say what is fucking kuse? She kuse, for example. You can say that's my knife. Or nde kuse, your knife. So you would use these second basically when you use these let's see, the second class, these ones with substantivos, with nouns, that creates a possessive relationship. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, so basically you're saying I knife, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it would be literally translated. It's hard to translate this into like I, you, me, because it can be one of those things depending on it, right? Like I would mostly translate this one as I because it always means the subject, right? Like I. Mm-hmm. But this one is more like me, mine, yeah, pretty much me and mine in English. There's more options in Portuguese.
Okay.
All right. But yeah, okay, like if you see this in front of a transitive root, you have to realize that's first going to fulfill the paper of an object, right? So if you see a transitive root and then you see this she, you have to understand it's not possessive, it's the object. Then the one to the left of the she, that's going to be what's possessing it or the subject. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think so.
All right. We can go more into depth on that in later lessons. You have a question, Igor?
Oh no, I guess it was answered. It was about like when we use the possessive to refer to relatives and people that are my family or boyfriend, husband, and etc. It's the same.
Yeah, that's something that we call it's necessarily possessive. It's like you can't unpossess it, right? So that's for example my hand, shepo. I can't not have my hand, right? I can. You can have what used to be my hand, right? So you can say something like ereko, you have. We can use areko to mean ter, right? So we can talk about having something in the moment, in our possession, that's different than something inherently being ours, right? So there's, let me see if I can find the verb here. Ereko. So this literally means fazer estar consigo. This means to make be with you. That's what having something is, right? So if I say ereko shepoguera, that means you have what used to be my hand. That means you cut off my hand, or you found my hand lying somewhere, because you can't have my hand, right? Because it's mine, and it's on my body. The same way that I have a mother, I can't change who my mother was, right? Shesu is how we say this. Su, mother is su. Shesu, tupan su porangete. This is a good example. From Anchieta's poemas. Mãe de Deus, muito bela, right? Tupansu. You can use proper nouns to talk about possession as well. I can say Philsu to talk about Phil's mom, right? But we won't go there. Sorry, Phil. But you can use people's names, and then you can use this relationship that can create a possessive. Tupan is the word for Deus, for God, in Tupi, and that was not the word originally, right? Anchieta literally kind of took the word tupana, which is our word tapana. I wrote that wrong. Tupana, which means trovão, which I'm not finding for some reason. Let's see. Trovão, tupão. So it literally means thunder. So like he took this concept of thunder, right? It's like it's this really intense thing, all powerful, all around us. And he said, okay, that's what God is. That's how he tried to describe that. That's what God is. So that's why you'll see some cities are called Tupã, or, there's kind of Tupã is all around Brazil. That's where this comes from. It comes Anchieta taking this word that originally meant thunder and repurposing it to make a name that represents Christian God. Okay? So Tupã is Christian God. It never used to mean any god of the Tupi. It is a 100% Jesuit invention. It has nothing to do with the traditional religion of Tupi. So when we say Tupançu, that means the Mãe de Deus. And can someone tell me who is Mãe de Deus? Tupançu. Oh, I went too far back. Who is Mãe de Deus? Who is the mother of God? It's Mary. Mary is the mother of God. So when we say Tupançu, we're talking about Nossa Senhora da Conceição, all those names. So that's how you pray to Mother Mary in Tupi. Next time you pray, you can say Tupançu porangete. And porang means what? Who knows what porang means? Anyone watch BBB Cunha Poranga? Cunha Poranga, let's search it up. It means belo, bonito, right? Porang. And so, Tupançu porangete. Now, ete means verdade. And so it kind of means muito. So that's how we create these phrases. We'll go back so you can take a look at it. Tupançu porangete. And this is attached to the sun. They just put this hyphen to make it easier to read. Mãe de Deus, muito bela. You can pray next time with that instead of Portuguese. All right. Any more questions before we go back to the pronunciation guide? I'm loving these questions. They're good questions. Okay. So we got to so'o. Next we have ava. I'll click on it, but ava. This means hair. Don't confuse this with ava. That means man or indigenous man, right? So ava originally, before the arrival of Europeans, just meant man. Then we start to see certain words being used to distinguish indigenous men, Tupian speaking men, from European men. And so we have certain words like Caraíba, which we see having multiple uses, which I personally am like, this was wrong. But basically, Caraíba was a religious term used by the Tupi to talk about prophets, right? And so Anchieta took this term and he said, we're Caraíba too. We're also bringing you the word of God, right? So he takes this word that used to mean indigenous prophet and he makes it mean Christian. He makes it mean saint, right? So he describes saints as Caraíba. And he also uses it as a synonym for white men. So we have this effort to create a synonym between sanctity, Christianity, and whiteness, right? And white men specifically, to try and create in the mind of these indigenous people that he was catechizing, right? Catechisms, evangelizing that, okay, you have to associate white people with, bondade, with a good life, with the Christian life, no sins, right? And so that's when you have interesting words like Caraíba. So here, for example, for the E, bebé, right? That means flying. So if you put those two words together, Caraíba, that means flying Christian. What does that mean? That means anjo. That means angel. So angels were described as flying Christians, right? That makes sense. Caraíba. So it's pretty interesting how over history he basically took these words and he just turned them into completely different things to kind of fuel the Portuguese cause and the Christian cause. So the next one is cunhã. Cunhã. Woman. Tawa. Village. Tawa. So this is like aldeia. This is like a small village. Tawa. For words like city these days, we use neologisms, which are like Taguaçu. This guaçu that I say, açu, that you see at the end of a lot of Brazilian names, Iguaçu, things like that. It's a aumentative. So it's like saying so it means big. So if I say Tawa, that means village. If I say Taguaçu, that literally means big village. So we use that for things like cities, right? Taguaçu. So a city could be Taguaçu. And if it's a small one, it would be Tabaim or Tabamirim. Mirim means little. So if you see Moji Mirim, places like this that have this Mirim in the title, that Mirim means small, baby, little one. So we have the Mirim and the Guaçu. And Mirim sometimes is just in. So Tabaim, you can just do it like that. Tava. We have quer, to sleep. This is an intransitive verb, but it's not of the second class. And something interesting about intransitive verbs that aren't of the second class is that first class verbs, if you use them with the prefixes from the second class, they kind of you can do that, but it means something else. And let me see if I can give you an example here. I'm going to open a window, open a text document. Text, edit. Okay. Can you guys see that? So if I say aquer, that means I sleep, I slept. It can even mean I will sleep. So that's just verbs in Tupi don't have time. So aquer means I sleep. We're talking about an action that I did. Now if I say, how do I say my sleep? I'm talking about a noun. Like, how was your sleep? How can I say my sleep? Can someone guess? Make these bigger. Here we go. All right, let's see. How about you try, Julia? We have quer is the verb. Now I want to make a noun. I want to talk about my sleep. My sleep last night. I'm trying to refer to it. How would I say that?
That's when you need the, how you call it? Like the prefix before?
We're going to add a suffix. We're going to add the A onto it. So quera, che quera. Minha dormida, my sleep, right? We're talking about my sleep last night. My sleep in the future. It could be in the future, right? So, it corrected it to Vera. Chequera. The autocorrection doesn't like Tupi. I'll just tell you that from the start. It's going to be a constant battle trying to write this. So now what happens if I write chequer, right? Now we're treating this first class verb as though it was a stative verb. or a second class verb, the one that we just talked about. So if I say sheker, this means like I am a sleeper. I am what sleeps, right? This kind of gets the same meaning as a stative verb. So we can actually use first class verbs as if they were second class verbs, but it doesn't go the other way around. We can't use second class verbs like they were first class verbs. And so this basically just means like I am a sleeper, like I am what sleeps would be a better translation, right? So we're describing the sleeping, this action of sleeping, as a quality of ourselves, right? So that's why it kind of gets this adjective kind of feel where it's like I am what sleeps. So those are the different ways that these can be conjugated, just so you guys know. It can be as a verb, it can be as a noun, or it can be as an adjective, right? Those are the different forms that we see there.
So let me ask you something.
Yes.
So we don't necessarily need the subject to make a sentence. For example, I sleep. I don't have to use ishe. Is that
correct? The ishe is optional. The ishe should be used.
Okay.
Just like in Portuguese, you don't have to use it if it's obvious. Then you don't have to use it. If it's questionable, which usually it's not because of this, then yeah. Technically, legally speaking, right? Like grammatically, we can put the ishe here too. Ishe shekera. Well, that actually doesn't make sense because that's a possessive. But in the ishe sheker, technically we could think about it that way. But it's just unnecessary to put the ishe. But there could be situations where it's confusing, and you do need to put the ishe. And I think you'll just figure that out, as the cases come up. But yeah, it's pro drop. You don't have to put the ishe if you don't want.
Okay, got it. And you mentioned something about the A at the end of the words, something like. Can you go back to the pronunciation guide thing?
Yes.
Because there, for example, these. What is the word? If you scroll up a bit, these. Okay, because it's not a verb, right? So these aba thing.
Right. So, for example, so ab, right? Hair is something that we have. So if you said she'ab, and you took away the a, that means I am what has hair. So cabeludo, I am haired, right? I am what has hair. So if you say she'aba, you're saying my hair. You say she'ab, you're saying I have hair. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, one more question.
Uh-huh.
Can we make verbs out of any word?
Pretty much. If it has, let's see, if it ends in a consonant and it's possessive, right? So let's take a look at Tawa for example. It's a village. Can we have a village? Not really. The village is something that we're a part of. So it wouldn't make sense to say shetab, sherab, for example, because it's a pluriform word, or shetab. That you could say it, right? And it would have some grammatical value where it's like, oh, I am villaged. I am what has a village. But would we say that in Tupi? Probably not. So I think it comes down to the word itself and whether it makes sense to use it that way. And because this is a dead language, we can't always ask a native speaker hey, would you use it this way? Because we don't really know. So yeah, for the most part, if I say che bebe, I could be saying my flight, or something that or I am what flies. If I say che bebe, because that means flight, right? But because it ends in a vowel and not an a, we don't add the a, so that it's the same. So it can be ambiguous sometimes. So usually we rely on the context to let us know about that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, and if it is a noun, it would only ever become a second class verb, a stative verb, meaning that you are or have that thing, right? It will never become an active verb unless we put the mo at the front, or edo. There's another one. but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. So yeah, they always become second-class verbs. First-class verbs are always going to be first-class verbs, and you'll just have to learn which ones are which. Okay. Añe.
Añe.
Añe. So that means really. This one is an adverb. So adverbs in Tupi can kind of go wherever they want. You can do it before, you can do it after. When you do it before, we get a different way of conjugating the verb. But we'll go into that in a different lesson. Let's see this one.
Sawi.
Sawi. Sawi. So this is kind of like a W, this we. If you see this U with a hat, sometimes you'll see a G before it in Navajo's book. It's pronounced the same way. It doesn't make a difference. You're going to pronounce it the same way. It's just the G sometimes makes it more obvious or full. But like, if you look, for example, the definition of sawi in the book is o mesmo que sagui. So, it's the same word. It's just a different way to write it. Sawi.
Sawi.
Marmoset. If you say marmoset, Phil, do you know what a marmoset is? Yeah, this is one of those words that any English speaker isn't going to know what this is. If you say, oh, yeah, it's a marmoset, they'll be like, what is a marmoset? You have to be like, oh, it's a type of monkey that lives in Brazil, because in our countries, we don't have these monkeys. It's funny. Ui.
E. Honestly, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was until I looked it up. I had to translate it. I was like, how do I write this in English? So it's pretty funny. So ui. Ui. This one has the glottal stop. It's an E, just like normal means flour. Farinha. Farinha. Aiva. Aiva.
Aiva.
Aiva. This means poor or bad, right? So if you guys have been to Paraíba, that means a poor river or a bad river, right? They call it that because it's hard to navigate. They built the city around a curve in the river, and it's hard to get there, so they call it a bad river, Paraíba, because it's hard to get your boat through.
Sorry, I just want to mention, I just noticed the notification 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I guess we had some good questions, so we didn't end up going through it, but I guess I'll leave it off here. If you guys have any questions in the next class, we can talk about the pronunciation more. Please do spend, it shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes. You can even do it right now after class. Just click on the sounds, go through them, practice, say it like 3-4 times for each word. Read the definitions in Portuguese and English, and if you have any questions, you guys can always send me the questions on Instagram, or better yet, hold on to them and talk to them with everyone at the next class. So yeah, if I'll stay on here as long as you guys have any questions about the lesson or anything else, and then once the questions are gone, you guys can leave at will. You can leave now or after the questions if you have a question. But other than that, thank you so much for the class. I think it was a great class, and we covered a lot of cool stuff.
All right, so I have some more questions.
Yeah, go for it.
It's not actually a question. Like, we can see a pattern that all the B sounds, they are like this mixture between a B and a V.
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah, if you've ever heard Spanish people speak, it's closer to how they speak. It's not an approximate, but it's not a bilabial tap. It's between that. So that's the difference between, we have ba in Portuguese, in English, ba, and then we have wa. So it's somewhere in between that. It's like la, va, la. You're not exact. You're getting close. La, va. It's a light tap. We're not. It's not a plosive, right? With a B, it's a plosive. Where we're saying ba. We're releasing air. We're not releasing air when we do this B. It's just va, va. It's just a vocalization.
Same goes with the G sound.
With the which one?
With the G sound?
Yeah, so that G sound actually isn't really pronounced at all. It's it'll either realize itself as a glottal stop, like the kind of thing, or it'll be just a W, like a wa. So aiquab. Sometimes we write this word. It means I understand. So if you guys want to respond to me from now on, say aiquab. It means I understood. I'll write that here. So aiquab. That means I understood. Sometimes people write it as kuab. Some people write it like that. But no matter what, you're going to pronounce it as kuab. Kuab. Aiquab. That makes sense? All right. Any more questions? All right. Perfect. Well, if that's all, I'll give you back your Saturday. Thank you so much for learning 2P.
Thank you.
Tchau, gente.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Valeu, falou.